The ravine was never meant to be silent. For as long as memory stretched, this place, cut like a winding scar between dense tropical groves, had echoed with the sounds of the jungle. The percussion of distant hornbills, the rhythmic pounding of male gorillas announcing territory, the drumming of rain against the canopy, the rattling of cicadas when the heat rose. Even the mandrills used this ravine to amplify their calls, letting their voices bounce between the ancient stone walls in deep, resonant booms. But today, the ravine held only dust and a silence so dry it scraped the throat. A mandrill named Kadu sat on a sloping ledge halfway down the ravine, his bright muzzle dulled by a layer of powder-fine grit. His fingers dug absently into the warm earth, pulling up thin streams of dirt that drifted away on a faint, exhausted breeze. His chest rose and fell in slow, uneasy breaths. Around him, the air lacked the thick humidity that usually clung to fur and skin. It was wrong. Everything felt wrong. Kadu tilted his head, listening. Nothing answered. No bird calls. No insects. No echo of the forest's heartbeat. Only the occasional far-off thud, dried leaves falling from a canopy unable to hold them anymore. The ravine walls, usually streaked with moss and moisture, had turned pale and brittle. Fissures etched down their surfaces. Where rivulets once trickled after every storm, now only long dry stains remained. Even the vines that dangled from the upper lip of the ravine had shriveled, hanging like lifeless ropes. Kadu's ears twitched. A troop of younger mandrills should have been nearby, racing along the ridge, shaking branches, making their playful racket. But they hadn't appeared in days. The entire troop had moved deeper into the forest in search of fruit that hadn't shriveled on the branch, of roots that weren't chalk hard, of insects that hadn't buried themselves to escape the heat. Kadu stayed behind. He always lingered where sound lived, but sound no longer lived here. He rose slowly, dust sliding down his legs. He descended the slope in careful steps, claws scraping stone that felt too warm. At the bottom of the ravine lay what used to be a shallow stream. Now it was only a trough of cracked earth. Some of the cracks were wide enough for him to slip a finger inside. The soil beneath felt hot, almost feverish. He sniffed. He smelled nothing alive, only minerals, dust, and the faint scent of dried algae long dead. He moved deeper into the ravine. Usually, this place magnified everything. The drum-like stomping of elephants in the distance, the tremors of running antelope, the bouncing notes of monkeys, even the dull pounding of rain. But now, even Kadu's own footsteps seemed swallowed before they echoed. The jungle had not fallen silent. It had stopped reverberating. Something blocked the voice of the forest. Kadu lifted his face toward the upper canopy, where sunlight pushed through in harsh white beams. Leaves drooped, yellowed, curled. Not from drought alone, Kadu had lived through droughts. This was different. The air lacked depth. No humidity, no density, nothing to carry sound. A soundless jungle was a dying one. Something flickered above the ravine, movement of tools, not animals. Humans. Kadu moved closer, peering upward through the broken vines. On the ridge, several humans worked near metal cases, equipment stands, and a weather mast. They adjusted microphones, checked recording devices, aimed sensors toward the forest. He recognized these humans. They visited often to study the jungle's acoustic patterns. They'd named the phenomenon here the natural drum chamber, because every creature's call became amplified in unique ways. But today the humans looked confused, troubled, even frightened. A woman tapped the console of a large recording unit. Nothing, no low-frequency resonance at all. A man adjusted a parabolic dish. I'm telling you, even the elephants aren't producing infrasonic waves. Either they've moved far away or the air isn't carrying it. Another tech knelt, checking the air density sensor. The readings don't make sense. Humidity is crashing at ground level. The sound can't propagate through this dry layer. Kadu didn't understand their words, but he understood sound, and the absence of it. He climbed a little higher to get closer. The humans raised another sensor, a long narrow tube with dangling wires, and lowered it into the ravine. It hummed briefly. The man observing the data frowned deeply. It's like the atmosphere has decoupled. There's no medium for resonance. The jungle can shout all it wants, but nothing will travel. Kadu felt his chest tighten. The jungle was shouting. He just couldn't hear it. Or no, the jungle wanted to shout, but couldn't. He moved along the wall, passing a broken branch lying on the ground. When he touched it, it snapped instantly, dry as bone. A cicada shell clung nearby, empty and clean, with no living insect inside. Even the bugs had either retreated or died. He travelled farther. In a shaded corner of the ravine, he found an old drum tree, a hollow trunk prized by mandrills and gorillas alike. When struck, it produced deep thumping sounds that travelled across the forest. Generations of animals had used it for communication. Its bark was worn smooth from years of pounding. Kadu approached cautiously, breath shallow. He placed both hands on the trunk. He struck it, hard. The sound thudded dully. No resonance, no boom, no echo returning from the ravine walls, only dead silence, as if the air absorbed the sound instantly. Kadu struck again, again, nothing. The jungle's drums, the rhythm every creature recognized, had fallen mute. He pressed his ear to the trunk. Even vibrations inside the wood felt wrong, weak, uneager to travel. He backed away slowly, unsettled. Above him, the humans continued speaking into radios. The inversion layer is affecting acoustic transmission. No low-frequency propagation. It's like talking through powdered glass. Animals will lose territory cues. This is going to disrupt everything. Kadu didn't understand the scientific terms, but he understood disruption. Predators used sound. Prey used sound. Mandrills used sound for social hierarchy, territory, alarm. Without sound, confusion would spread like drought. A rustling above drew his attention. A small family of colobus monkeys appeared on the ridge, unusually cautious. Their movements were uncertain. Without the usual ambient calls to guide them, they seemed disoriented. Kadu watched them leap from branch to branch. Their landings were clumsy, mistimed, as if they couldn't judge distance. Sound helped orientation more than animals realized. Without it, even the experienced moved like beginners. One monkey misjudged a branch and fell hard, catching itself at the last moment. Others screeched in alarm, but their cries lacked volume. Their voices sounded thin, short, crippled by the dry, stagnant air. The jungle couldn't project. It couldn't lift sound. It couldn't carry warnings. It couldn't drum. Kadu sat down again in the dusty ravine, his muzzle streaked with grit. He looked at the cracks in the earth, at the silent trees, at the humans frowning at their failing instruments, at the monkeys moving like shadows. He pressed his hands to his chest, feeling for the heartbeat that should reverberate in the ravine. It didn't. The ravine that once amplified voices now swallowed them. The jungle that once sang now whispered. Or perhaps it didn't speak at all. Kadu blinked slowly, heavy with understanding. Until the air regained its weight, until humidity returned, until leaves revived and insects rose from hiding, until the atmosphere remembered how to vibrate. The drums of the jungle would remain silent, and Kadu, born into a world of rhythm and resonance, found himself sitting in a place where even the heartbeat of the forest had forgotten how to echo. Kadu climbed slowly out of the ravine, claws scraping dry stone that broke under his grip more easily than it ever had. Dust drifted around him with every movement, settling on his fur, muting even the bright colours of his face. He paused midway up the steep slope and listened again. Still nothing. No resonance, no rhythm, no heartbeat of the jungle. Only the sigh of warm, weightless air slipping past leaves that no longer rustled, only rattled like paper. The absence felt so vast it made his chest ache. Mandrills relied on sound as much as sight. Their world was built from echoes and calls, dominance grunts, leaf rustles, warnings from above and below. Without sound, the forest felt blind. He reached the top of the ravine and stepped into the thinning shade of the canopy. The jungle should have greeted him with its usual greeting, the layered clamour of life working, feeding, communicating. Instead, it met him with scattered movements and tense, quiet eyes. A pair of duikers moved through dead ferns, hooves crunching louder than usual because everything else was so silent. They flinched at every sound they produced, unused to hearing themselves in such clarity. Without background noise to mask their movements, each step felt like a mistake. Above, a hornbill landed heavily on a brittle branch. The crack echoed unnaturally, a sharp, singular sound that travelled only a metre before dying in the dry air. The bird looked startled by its own landing, clacking its beak in confusion. Kadu climbed a fallen trunk and approached the Mandrill troops' usual gathering ground, a clearing surrounded by fruiting trees, roots, vines, all of which now seemed oddly distant, as if waiting for instruction they could no longer hear. He spotted them. Dozens of mandrills huddled together in the space, shoulders tense, movements skittish. Their usual chatter, grunts, chirps, soft hoots, was faint, barely audible. The air simply refused to carry their voices. Calls that once boomed across the jungle now dampened immediately, collapsing into silence before reaching neighbouring groups. The troop leaders usually asserted dominance every morning, a rising sequence of chest rumbles, ground slaps, loud barks that reverberated through the forest, reminding everyone of order. But today the dominant male, Orobu, stood awkwardly on a root, chest puffing, throat swelling. He opened his mouth and barked. The sound hit the air like a stone tossed into sand. It thudded and vanished. No echo, no authority, nothing to mark him as chief. Younger males stiffened, not in submission, in confusion. Kadu watched as Orobu barked again, louder this time, his body shaking with effort. His barks echoed in his own skull, but only carried a few meters. Several females looked up briefly, then returned to nervously picking at the dry shrubs. Without the booming resonance of the ravine or even the natural acoustics of the forest, Orobu's dominance call was just a noise. One noise among many, no longer the thing that kept peace and order. Two younger males glanced at each other, then at Orobu. Their bodies tensed, their eyebrows lifted, their fangs flashed in confusion bordering challenge. They had misread the situation. Kadu felt tension balloon inside the clearing. He stepped back behind a fallen branch, heart beating faster. Orobu sensed the challenge too. He turned, eyes blazing, and rushed toward the younger male. But even his charging steps did not thunder like they should have. The leaves did not rustle. The ground did not vibrate. His warning bark dissolved in the thick, dry air. The young male misinterpreted the mute movement as weakness, not strength. He met Orobu halfway. A clash erupted, not the usual booming, echoing fight that sent birds scattering and animals fleeing, but a strangely muffled struggle with no resonance at all. Fists struck fur, claws raked shoulders, bodies crashed into trunks, but the forest produced no answering chorus. The fight sounded small, helpless, wrong. Females chirped softly in alarm, but their calls reached no one beyond their immediate circle. Infants clung to their mother's fur, eyes wide and silent. Kadu watched, stunned, as Orobu struck the younger male aside. The challenge ended quickly, the hierarchy preserved, but the troop did not respond as they normally would. Without the echo of dominance reverberating through the trees, many didn't even register the end of the conflict. The social order, normally reinforced by shared sound, scattered like dry leaves. Kadu turned away. Instinct drove him toward the human platform again. Humans made noise, constant noise. If the forest could not speak, perhaps the humans could explain why. He found them halfway through repositioning equipment. Microphones bristled from metal rigs. A long directional array faced the canopy. Cables snaked across the ground like limp vines. One of the scientists checked readings on a laptop, shaking her head. Sound attenuation is unbelievable. Frequencies below 400 Hz are collapsing instantly. Another, adjusting a sensor tower. The air density is too low for proper propagation. Humidity is at rock bottom. Everything is getting swallowed. A third tapped a barometric instrument. We're seeing a complete decoupling between upper and lower layers. This is why even elephants sound muted. Kadu sat in the underbrush, watching them work. Then he heard something, a faint mechanical whir. A drone lifted into the air. It buzzed loudly, but even its noise dampened quickly. The scientist below frowned. Even our drone acoustics are distorted. This is catastrophic for wildlife communication. The drone flew over the ravine, mapping sound decay. Sparks of its shadow flitted along the ground. Kadu watched its movement, mesmerized but anxious. The sky swallowed its noise just as it swallowed the jungles. He left the humans and wandered to a deeper grove. Here the canopy thickened slightly, offering a hint of green life trying to persist. But even here, silence reigned. A group of colobus monkeys sat listlessly in a tree, grooming each other without vocalizing. Normally they filled the air with their peculiar snorts and rattling calls. One monkey attempted a call, a short, rattling "kurr, kurr." It barely travelled beyond its own branch. The monkey stared into the air, confused. Then it tried louder, puffing its chest. Nothing. A sudden rustle startled them, a movement from the bushes. But without echo, without directional cues, the monkeys froze, unable to determine where the sound came from. Panic spread silently. They scattered in multiple directions, nearly colliding as they leapt wildly between branches. Kadu felt a shiver trace his spine. Animals couldn't orient, couldn't communicate, couldn't warn. The jungle depended on shared noise, not constant noise, but functional noise. Communication, information, territory, alarm, comfort. Without it, everything became dangerous. He continued wandering until he reached a tree he knew well, a towering fig that always hosted insect hums, bird nests, clattering fruit. Today, a single fig fell from a branch. Instead of producing the thump that usually vibrated through the ground, it landed with a pathetic puff of dust. Even gravity felt quiet. Kadu climbed onto a root and sat. He pressed his hand to his chest again, feeling his heartbeat. The beat was steady, but it felt trapped inside him, unable to move into the world, unable to resonate. He closed his eyes and listened to the jungle one more time. No rain drumming, no insects chiming, no fruit falling in rhythm, no rival calls, no warnings. No drums of gorillas, no swell of frogs at dusk, no sound of wind moving through moist leaves, just a quiet, thin world stripped of the very thing that defined it. The jungle could live without rain for a short time, it could survive heat for seasons. But without communication, without its voice, it would tear itself apart, animal by animal, territory by territory, rage and fear spreading silently like cracks in dry earth. Kadu lifted his head into the silent breeze, feeling only dust and heat. Until the atmosphere regained its weight, until humidity returned, until sound could travel again, the forest would remain deaf to itself. And a jungle that cannot hear cannot survive.